Hello, thank you for joining Workshop 9 of The Black Family, United by History, Restored by Storytelling, brought to you by New York Life. The Association for the Study of African American Life and History, in collaboration with Archival Alchemy, presents this national program that highlights the legacy of Black family reunions while encouraging families of all backgrounds to build and renew their own familial traditions and stories. We encourage you to watch the rest of the videos in this series to learn more about oral storytelling, genealogy, and familial archiving. Once you view all of the videos, you could receive a certificate as a family historian from the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And now, let's get into Workshop 9, using DNA tests to explore ancestry, led by Dr. Gina Paige. Dr. Gina Paige is the co-founder of African Ancestry, the pioneer in genetic ancestry tracing for African Americans. To learn more about Dr. Paige and her work, please read her full bio in the YouTube description.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to DNA Genetic Storytelling. I'm Dr. Gina Paige, the co-founder and president of AfricanAncestry.com, and I'm looking forward to spending the next few moments with you to talk about genetic genealogy and how DNA can be used to help us tell stories and uncover the history of our family's roots. As African Americans, as people of African descent, we were taken from the shores of West and Central Africa and brought to the Americas. And over that process, lost everything that defines who we are. We lost our names, we lost our languages, we lost the freedom to honor our ancestors, and our families were completely torn apart. In my opinion, that makes us the original victims of identity theft. If you don't know any of those things, then how can you possibly know who you are? And in fact, psychologists teach us that knowing where you're from is a critical component to knowing who you are. When we want to explore who we are, one of the first places we look is to our family tree, right? We look at all the people who came before us to get a sense of not just our past, but what's possible for our futures. As Black people, I would argue that our family trees look something like this. They've got all kinds of branches and leaves and deep roots, and everything's convoluted, and it's just not a simple, straightforward tree. When we're looking to find out about ourselves, there are things that we can see on our tree, like the leaves, the branches. There are things that are missing, like on this area of the tree where you don't see any leaves, it's a bare branch. And then there are the things we can't see, the roots that go deep, deep into the earth. And for trees as robust and as significant as our families are, we know that those roots run very, very deep. The question is, how do we understand, how do we identify those roots? Let's talk about how our families are structured. Now, if you've gone through the series, you've already had Genealogy 101. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview, a reminder, if you will, of how our families work. We're each made up of two people, right? We have a mother and a father. If we go back another generation, now there are four people who contribute to who we are, four grandparents. If we go back another generation, now we've got 8 people, 8 branches of our family tree that make up who we are. And that's just going back 3 generations. Well, what if we went back over 10 generations? How many branches would there be, and are there actually, in our family tree? Over 1,000 ancestors make up who we are. Now, when you look to go find out something about those ancestors, you're not going to go and search 1,000 people. You're just not going to do it. You're not going to go search even 500 or 100 or even 20 people all at one time. That's just not a practical approach. You may start and look for one branch of the tree, this branch that represents you, your mother, her mother, her mother, her mother, and so on. Or you might decide you want to learn about your great grandmother on your mother's father's side, right? You may decide that you want to look at a different line. Maybe you want to go over to your father's side of the family and look for information about this great grandfather. Or you may even just decide that you want to go strictly paternal and look for your father's father's father and figure out who he was. How did he live? How did he contribute to the community? What were his beliefs? All of those are questions that we start to ask when we're exploring our family's past. Now, there are two different research methods that you can undertake to research or learn more about your family tree. The first one that you've learned about already is genealogy. And as you know, genealogy is researching the descent of a person, a family, or a group using written and oral records. And then there's this newer research method that is genetic ancestry testing or genetic ancestry tracing. And that's doing the same type of research of the origin of a person, family, or group, only this time you're using genetics. And so I'm going to briefly go over genealogy so that, as a refresher, as I said, so that it will be very clear to you how the two methods are different. So let's talk about genealogy. Now, genealogists, they do the hard work. Anybody who has tried their hand at genealogy knows that this is not an easy task. There are so many different ways that you can access information to learn about your family tree. One of the first ways people tend to do to execute or engage in, I'll say, is by just gathering pictures. Pictures are documents, right? And so this is a way that you can start to see what people look like. You can explore similarities, and you can start to see family trends even just from pictures. And there is even the possibility of learning about the date that someone was a certain age by just looking at the picture. There are experts who can give you the dates of photos. But photos are just the tip of the iceberg, right? You also can do interviews. You can interview family members and ask a series of questions to get to the meat of the family history, right? The family gossip, the family folklore. There are also census records. There are newspaper articles that can serve as forms of research for genealogists. Military records, birth records, death records. You can travel to the archives, the National Archives in Washington, D.C. You can gather information from family reunions. You can go to the local library. There are all of these tools that are available to us using what's seen. Remember, I talked about what we can see and what we can't see. So you can see and touch all of these types of materials, these types of tools to help you learn more about who you are through your family. Inevitably, though, there's going to be a brick wall. We weren't even recorded as humans, as people, on a federal census until 1870. And so there are lots of resources that are available to you to help you get past that brick wall as far as you can. But the honest truth is, if you want to know where your people were before Mississippi or before Alabama or Jamaica or Trinidad or South America, a South American country, it's going to be really hard, almost impossible, I would say, to get that answer. This is a list of genealogy resources that have worked very well for African ancestry family members in exploring their family trees. And I highly recommend that you contact the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, better known as ASALH, because they are African Americans, people of African descent, who are experts at doing genealogy research in communities all across the country. Now, that's using what's seen, the tangible things that we can touch and feel. I'm here today to really dig in with you about genetic ancestry tracing. And we know that we can't see our genetics. That's the unseen. So we are now able to explore the parts of us that we cannot see to get information that takes us beyond the brick wall and actually give us details about where our families were, where our ancestors were prior to the transatlantic slave trade. So there's this unseen power in our DNA, right? You didn't see anything in my bio about being a geneticist because I'm not a geneticist. But what I can do is give you enough genetics information to make you all just as smart in genetics as I am by the end of this conversation. So DNA is found in every cell of our bodies. It's what makes us human. Over 99.9% of our DNA is the same. Everyone's is the same. Mine is the same as yours. Yours is the same as the person who lives next door. Theirs is the same as the person who helps you at the grocery store. We're human. And for all of the things that separate us, there's far more that makes us the same. And it's found in our DNA. So when we look at our DNA, we can find unique things about ourselves. So our hair texture is found in our DNA, our height, our skin color, the shape of our noses, characteristics of disease can be found in our DNA, and our ancestry can be found in our DNA. All of these things that make us different, I just want to drill this point home, is less than 0.1% of our DNA. There's power in these very, very tiny parts, minuscule parts of our body. So how do we get our DNA? We each inherit 50% of our DNA from our mother and 50% from our father. So if your mother's yellow and your father's blue, then you're going to be green. So imagine that you're green. All of us participating in this are green, but we have a little yellow dot. We have a little bit of DNA that we inherited from our mother that didn't mix. It didn't turn green. That's called mitochondrial DNA. mtDNA is maybe how you've seen it written. Everybody inherits mitochondrial DNA from their mother. If you have brothers and sisters, you all have the exact same mitochondrial DNA that you got from your mother. Well, she got it unchanged from her mother. And she got it from her mother and her mother and her mother, so on for generations, that even though everything else got mixed together, that mitochondrial DNA does not change. And so when geneticists can find or identify someone else in the world who has your same mitochondrial DNA code, if you will, then you have to share a common maternal genetic ancestry. You have to, because it didn't change. So an example of this would be, let's take me for an example, right? If my mother, if we we unlocked the code of my mother's yellow dot, her mitochondrial DNA, and I share the same DNA. Everybody on this branch of the tree shares that same DNA. Well, we found matches of that yellow dot among Fulani people who are living in Nigeria today. So I can say definitively that I have maternal genetic ancestry in Nigeria, not just that it's African, not that it's in some region, but that it's shared by the Fulani people. And then I can explore the Fulani to learn that they're nomads, that they've traveled for centuries across from the Sahara to the Sahel, that they have a certain code of behavior, that they're traders, that they're herders. All of these things, that they're beautiful, the significance of the fabrics they wear, the significance of the earrings and the jewelry that they wear. All of those things are facts, traits, cultural practices, beliefs that inform who I am, have informed my maternal line in ways that we didn't even know prior to being able to use our DNA to answer this question. Now, you all know, because you are history lovers, if you're watching ASALH TV, you are a history lover, and you know that as African Americans, as people of African descent in the Americas, none of us is 100% African. We just aren't. Inherent in the word African American is a mixing that occurred, right? So we aren't always going to find African results when we trace a lineage. If we go back to this family tree, this one branch of my tree could have very easily gone to Europe or to an indigenous American population or to a Middle Eastern population or an Asian population. We didn't know what we would find until we did the test. Let's say my result came back Native American. That doesn't mean I'm not Black. That doesn't mean I don't have any African ancestry. It simply means that there was an indigenous American woman somewhere along my maternal line. We share the same mitochondrial DNA. So that's how we explore maternal ancestry here at AfricanAncestry.com. Let's look at paternal ancestry. If we go back to our art lesson, our mother's yellow, our father's blue, we're green, but now all the men, they also have a blue dot. They also have a little bit of DNA that they've inherited from the father that didn't mix. It didn't turn green. And that's called the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is paternally inherited. So it's passed from father to son, male child, father to son, over generations. Kind of like your last name, right? The last name doesn't tend to change from father to son, father to son. And so we want to learn something about a paternal branch of our family tree using our unseen power in the Y chromosome. Then we need a male person to take the test, a biological male, and we would unlock the code of the Y chromosome or the blue dot and determine where in the world that ancestry was found. Now, at African Ancestry, we focus our analyses on the past 500 to 2,000 years. And we do that because we're answering a very specific question. The question is, where were my ancestors prior to the transatlantic slave trade? So keep that in mind. So I wanted to use my business partner, Dr. Rick Kittles, as an example. These are just the facts. You look at Dr. Kittles there in the middle, you say an African American man, right? And you wouldn't necessarily think that he had any European ancestry anywhere in his family tree. Well, when he unlocked the code of his yellow dot, his maternal ancestry, he found that he shares maternal ancestry with Mandinka people living in the country of Senegal today. Now, remember I told you that we never know if it's going to be African or not, but what we do know is that there's a 92% chance that his yellow dot would have been African, and it was. And so he was able to explore the culture and the traditional practices, the beliefs, the values of the Mandinka people, and to figure out how they have informed his maternal family, or, how he wants to incorporate those into his identity going forward. Now, because Dr. Kittles is a male, He also has a Y chromosome, and there was a 35% chance that his Y chromosome would go back to Europe. And in fact, it did. It went back to Germany. Now, here's a Black man, clearly a Black man, clearly a man with African ancestry. But the Kittles, his last name, the Kittles Y chromosome goes back to a German family. Now, this is consistent actually with the genealogy research that his family has done. So genealogy and genetics can often work hand in hand. They are complementary tools. One is not intended to replace the other. They work together to give you a comprehensive view of who you are. And so Dr. Kittles actually expected to get a German result for his Y chromosome, because where he lives in Sylvania, or where he's from in Sylvania, Georgia, there were the Black Kittles and the white Kittles. So it's not when he got the result, it wasn't an attack on his Africanness or anything like that. It was just the simple fact, like many of us, like actually all of us, I would argue, that there was a white man in his paternal line. So I hope that that is clear to everybody, how we can use this genetic information to unlock details that were unseen, unknown, to give us a more expanded sense of self. And I want to talk about identity a little bit. I think it's very important. We are in the identity business. And when we do this work, whether it's genealogy work, whether it's genetic genealogy work, you're bound to find out things that you didn't expect. You're bound to find out that, an ancestor maybe owned property that you didn't know they owned. Maybe you'll find out that an ancestor had a less than stellar pattern of behavior that the family may not have been proud of. Or, maybe you'll find out that you have an ancestor that invented something that helped change the world. All of these unseen, unknown things come to light about who we are. And we have the genetics of everybody that comes before us inside of us. We have the ability to be impacted by everything that has happened before us. In fact, there's an Akan proverb. The Akan are an indigenous group in Ghana, West Africa, that says you have to go back and fetch the past in order to move forward. And it's symbolized by Sankofa, a Sankofa bird. That is why we do this work, because we have to know who we are. We have to either learn who we are, remember who we are, in order to feel good about what's possible, in order to be motivated to do something differently in the future. And when you know what's been done before, then you don't have to repeat the same mistakes, and you can build on the progress instead of feeling like you're starting at square one all the time. Our identity is something that's constantly evolving. That's the definition of identity. It's a constantly evolving narrative of self. You get to be whoever it is you want to be. And I encourage you to get as much information as possible to help you decide how you're going to move forward. So the reason we're able to do this work is because of Dr. Rick Kittles, who is a renowned leading African-American geneticist who really just wanted to know where he was from. It's quite that simple. He was working in genetics. He worked on other populations. He worked with the genetics of some European populations and started to realize that, if I can explore ancestry for these other populations, I should be able to use genetics to explore my own ancestry. And that led to him compiling a database, which is now the largest database of indigenous African lineages in the world. Another way to describe it is it's the largest collection of yellow dots and blue dots from African people. And that was intentional because he knew, based on historians, anthropologists, linguists, archaeologists. He knew that Black people in the Americas come from Africa. And so if he wanted to find out or figure out where in Africa he comes from, then he had to compile as many African DNA samples as possible so that he'd have the best chance of finding his matching yellow dot or his matching blue dot. Okay, I hope you're with me. And so today we actually have the largest database of indigenous African lineages in the world. We have over 33,000 samples from over 35 African countries and about 400 African ethnic groups. And so we don't just have samples and we say that they're from the Gold Coast. No, we have Akan samples from Ghana, Ewe samples from Ghana, the Fanti people of Ghana, the Ga people of Ghana. We don't just say that we have samples from the Grain Coast. No, we have the samples from Mende people in Sierra Leone, Temini people in Sierra Leone, Limba people in Sierra Leone, all the way down to Angola. We have Mbundu samples from Angola, and it goes on and on and on. So it's very important to us that we have the largest and most diverse number of samples from Africa so that we can help tell Black people where exactly in Africa they come from. We're the only company that does this, though. There are other companies out there that use DNA or genetics to answer different genetic genealogy questions. I'm going to show you exactly how ours work. So let's take someone like our ancestor, Dr. Maya Angelou. For those of you who have seen the Henry Louis Gates specials, you saw her learn her ancestry, her African ancestry using an AfricanAncestry.com test. So we have Dr. Maya Angelou. She swabbed the inside of her cheeks to collect the DNA. She sent the DNA to us. The lab that we work with unlocked the code of her yellow dot, and the code looks something like this. This is what a DNA sequence may look like. It's a combination of letters, a sequence of letters. The purple letters are the standard. So the purple letters identify that part of the code that the majority of humans share. The red letters are the differences, the mutations, the variations from the standard. And so we found her variation. What makes her yellow dot unique is that red C and that red G. So then Dr. Kittles took that sequence and compared it to all of the sequences in our database to look for a match. And he did find identical matches among people living in Sierra Leone today, present day Sierra Leone, and they are the Mende people. Fun fact about the Mende people is that in addition to being expert rice farmers and being taken specifically to farm rice plantations in South Carolina and the Georgia Sea Islands, where you today still see remnants of the Mende culture among the Gullah Geechee people. They were also on the Amistad. So we have a very diverse perspective on Mende people just in American culture through Gullah Geechee and then the story of the Amistad. And so we can say with absolute certainty that Dr. Maya Angelou shares maternal genetic ancestry with the Mende people living in the country of Sierra Leone today. So I started to mention the other companies in the industry. You all know who they are. You see their ads on television, you hear their ads on the radio, you see them online. They too offer genetic genealogy services. They can give you information about your genealogy based on your genetics. But whereas we look at, remember, the yellow dots or the blue dots, our competitors look at the green. They look at DNA, which is called autosomal DNA, the DNA that got mixed together. It all got mixed together. And then they tease out different information from the mixture. So it's very different. You can't tell whether it's maternally inherited along the yellow dot line of the family or paternally inherited. You just know that somewhere in your family tree, you have these different traits. And so when we're talking about African Americans who are looking for ancestry, who are looking for a connection to Africa, this is what happens. They have fewer than 2,000 samples from Africa. Okay, so remember I said we have 33,000. They have fewer than 2,000. So they take your green and they compare it to the green from African people, 2,000 African people across the entire continent. And you'll see a result something similar to this. They'll say that some percentage of your ancestry comes from Nigeria, which you see is that yellow region. So it expands beyond the present day borders of Nigeria. Then you see some percentage comes from Mali. Some percentage comes from southeastern Bantu people, which then ends up being a huge swath of Africa, Ivory Coast / Ghana, Cameroon / Congo. So you get these broad regions. You all are historians, right? You love ASALH. You already know that you're African. This would tell you that you're 69% African. You already knew that. You don't need DNA to answer that question. But what these tests can also do is they can tell you if you have a fifth or sixth cousin that also took the test, that also let them keep their DNA and in order to be researched. If they're in there, then you can find a fifth or sixth cousin. You can find a family member. For some of them, you can even find a health trait. So it really just depends, on what it is you're looking to find out. If your goal is to identify the ancestry of a specific line of your family tree, which we know as genealogists we look for, then this kind of testing will not answer that question. So I thought I'd try to show you kind of a apples to apples comparison to something that's not really apples to apples, but I hope that this illustration will make it very clear. So we're back to our family tree. We know that through African Ancestry, you can look at individual branches of the tree. And through other companies, you can look at the mixture of your entire genetic family tree. So we have a colleague whose results came back about 70% African. So similar to what I showed you in the previous slide. But she also had different members of her family do African ancestry testing. So while she knows that in her green, she's 70% African and 30% European, she also knows, because of African ancestry, that her maternal ancestry goes back to the Balanta people living in Guinea-Bissau today. We all chuckled when she got this result because the Balanta are known as those who resist. And we felt like that was very fitting ancestry for her. She looked at the other great grandmother that she has on her maternal line, and that ancestry goes back to the Hausa people. The Hausa people are in northern Nigeria and are often considered traders, traders. She had one of her mother's brothers take a paternal test, and that Y chromosome went back to Europe. So again, she wasn't surprised when she got an overall mixture answer that said she was 70% African, 30% European, because when she looks at this particular branch, it goes back to Europe. Now, the admixture test that she took, the tests from the other companies, it didn't say which parts of her family tree were European. and which part was it, on her mother's side or her father's side. It didn't get that specific. So this gave her more specificity. And then she had her father trace his maternal line, and it went back to the Akan people living in Ghana today. I mentioned the Akan earlier. They're known for Adinkra symbols. They're also known for Kente cloth. So again, we've incorporated a lot of Ghanaian culture into African American culture. And Afro-Caribbean culture as well, particularly when you talk about countries like Jamaica. She traced her other great-grandmother's line on her father's side, and that went back to the Fulani people living in the country of Guinea-Bissau today, which are different than the Fulani that I share ancestry with, who are living in Nigeria today. And then her father's line, her dad's blue dot, goes back to the Ashanti people living in Ghana today. And there's so much to learn about the Ashanti kingdom, a very prolific and important kingdom in Africa. So you can go broad with genetic genealogy to get percentages of ancestry, to see, take the chance to see if there are other family members, again, fourth, fifth cousins, who also are in those companies' databases, or to look for health traits. Or you can get specific down to the country and the ethnic group with AfricanAncestry.com. Another thing I want to make sure people understand about the differences between the two types of tests and the different companies in the industry is that African Ancestry is, one, a pioneer in this space. So we've been doing this work since 2003, before any of the companies that you see advertised were even in business. Two, we look like our customers. So we are Black led, we are Black founded, we are Black funded, and we have the only company that has Black scientists. And our entire staff is comprised of Black and brown people of African descent. In addition, we're the only company that does not sell or share your personal or genetic information. And so I know that is often a concern these days, and rightfully so. That has always been a part of the fabric of our companies. We've never sold or shared our customers' personal or genetic information. In fact, we have our labs destroy the DNA. So it can't be used, it can't be mined for any further information. And we're very proud of that fact, because historically, we know that there's a great deal of suspicion based on how our genetic material has been handled. You can tell I'm excited about genetic ancestry tracing. I'm very respectful of genealogy in general. It's not work that I think I'd be good at, but I know some absolutely beyond talented genealogists, even in my family, who have found information that has been life-changing for us in terms of our ancestors, our greats, and what they did and what they contributed. But making that connection to Africa through your DNA, that to me is an ancestral imperative. It is the one act that we can do that is liberating. As historians, you know that we were never intended to have this information. When we were disconnected, the intent was for us to stay disconnected, period. That was the only way that the system of slavery, the business of slavery, would survive and thrive, was on our disconnection. So they didn't want us to know where we were from. They didn't want us to plug back into that power. Because when you know that you come from people who created everything that society uses today, when you know that you come from people who were not slaves, scholars were stolen from Africa, healers were stolen from Africa, leaders were stolen from Africa, artists were stolen from Africa. Slaves were not stolen from Africa. We are not the descendants of slaves. When you can plug into that source, everything is different. I mean, we are talking transformation. It's incredible. It is the most powerful act of freedom that you can do for yourself that will set you on a trajectory that's unimaginable right now. I can tell you, after talking to hundreds of people, just me speaking with them directly about the impact of knowing where they're from and what that's had, what kind of impression that has made on their lives is, I've already said, unimaginable. I'm not even sure I have the words, but what I do have is hands-on experience with people who have gone through the process. So I wanted to share this clip. I'm celebrating another ancestor today, Chadwick Boseman, may he rest powerfully, and the impact that tracing his African ancestry had on him.
But as an African American, you're always going to feel like, until you make that connection, that there's a disconnect there. What I did is I took a DNA test.
Me too.
Yeah. So where you from?
I'm 97% East African, West African.
No, see, that's the wrong test.
Which one you took? Like you got the
you took Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
I took African Ancestry.
What's the difference?
So African Ancestry could tell you the specific ethnic group that you come from. So not only, if you just know, the country, that's still the European borders to a certain degree.
Gotcha.
But if you know that you're Yoruba from Nigeria, then you can now you can pinpoint specific customs and rituals.
Got you.
That are part of your past. If I know that I'm Jola from Guinea-Bissau, I'm naming all the stuff that I found in mine. That I'm Limba from Sierra Leone. That's a more specific. I could go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
There that specifically knows, this is your background.
I need to do that.
We were so excited when we heard this interview because it was the week leading up to the release of Black Panther. And you all know, I mean, everybody remembers when they went to see Black Panther, except for those like one or two people in the whole world who didn't see the movie, right? And to have T'Challa himself talk about the importance of the work that we've put, our time and sweat and energy into for the benefit of Black people around the world was just so fulfilling. And he said it with such conviction that our phones were ringing off the hook, and we just could not have imagined that he would do something like this for us. I don't know Chadwick Boseman. We are not friends. We did not pay him to do this. We did not even know he was doing this interview. And another fun fact, he did this interview in 2018. He had taken the test in 2009 and gotten other tests for different family members. You heard him talking about different things that he found. So he'd been using this information for 9 years and then decided to share it with the world at the time where he thought we needed it the most. And so we are forever indebted to Chadwick Boseman for that kind of support. That's what happens when you support Black business. He's a perfect example of supporting Black business for the uplift of the Black community. So he mentioned Sierra Leone as one of the ancestries that he found. His maternal ancestry is shared with the Limba people living in Sierra Leone. I showed you Dr. Maya Angelou, whose maternal ancestry was found among the Mende people living in Sierra Leone. And the Temini people are also another very large ethnic group in the country of Sierra Leone, which is one of the countries that we find the most often, actually, for people who've taken our test. People take this test for so many different reasons. They take it, as we started off saying, because they want to explore perhaps their genealogy. They may take it because they've traveled across Africa or to even one African country and have been asked, well, where are you from? Or have been adopted. Well, you must be from here. Or have seen other family members who look just like their family members. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, I saw my uncle in South Africa. I saw my grandfather in Dakar, Senegal. I saw my cousin in Yaoundé in Cameroon, right? So that makes them want to know, well, where am I from? There are people who are students who've been learning about African and African American studies and want to get a more complete picture of who they are. There are parents whose children go to multicultural schools who celebrate International Day. So what happens to your kid when they're celebrating International Day at school? What's your child going to celebrate? America? North Carolina? Virginia? Or are you just going to grab some kente cloth and celebrate Ghana, which is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But imagine when your child can use science by swabbing their cheek or having you swab your cheek, use science to say, here's where I'm from, and here's how they live, and here are the foods that they eat, and here are the customs that they have, and here's an example of the music that they listen to. Now, that's an entirely different educational experience for your child. In April of 2021, we had the honor of participating in a completely full circle moment for a group of 59 African Ancestry family members. In 2020, the president of Sierra Leone decided to give citizenship to people who could prove that through genetics that they descend from Sierra Leone, either on their maternal branch of their tree or their paternal branch of their family tree. And so in 2021, they welcomed 59 Sierra Leonean descendants home to receive citizenship. And I sat and watched as the president, who's there right in the center of the photo in the gray suit, as he handed a Sierra Leonean passport to each person individually, and then gave them an elbow bump because we're still in a pandemic. And to watch that experience for 59 people to come full circle was just, it was nothing that you would have ever been able to predict would happen. Because like I said, when we were stolen, it was with the intent that we would never return home. And many of us have returned home without knowing if that's where we were from. We've been to the slave forts and the dungeons and the castles. We've gone through the doors of no return in Ghana and in on Gorée Island in Senegal and in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone on Bunce Island. But to actually go home, have the leader of the country say, we see what's happening in America. We see Breonna Taylor. We see Ahmaud Arbery. We see George Floyd. And we want you to know that you have a home. And he welcomed them all home. So that's the power. That's what can happen when you reconnect to your African roots. And we're very honored to be able to do this work. Now, I want all of you to be genealogists. I want all of you to do the paper trail, follow the paper trail, and learn as much about at least one branch of your family tree as you possibly can. Start with a grandmother. Just pick a grandmother and take that line back as far as you can. Ask questions. Do a little research. You can go online. There are all sorts of free resources online. when you have your family reunion, collect the stories from people at the reunion, do all of that. But I also want you to join the African Ancestry family. I want you to be part of the over 1 million Black people who know where they're from in Africa. This is a movement. Can you imagine if we were all of us were able to experience that sense of pride? And so we've partnered with ASALH because you have watched this webinar, and because you've been involved and hopefully will watch all 6 of the series and get the certificate. We want to offer you 10% off of an African Ancestry test kit. So you can go to africanancestry.com and use the code ASALH, ASALH, and you will receive 10% off a matriclan test or an African Ancestry patriclan test. I want to thank you all for taking the time to explore genetic genealogy. I hope you all feel grounded and well-versed in the fundamentals of how the science works. And I hope you've been inspired to want to know more about your family and your African ancestry. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for Workshop 9 of